All right, let's just jump right in. I want you to come back with me for a minute, back to 1943. The entire world is engulfed in this massive, titanic struggle. World War II is hanging in the balance. But what if I told you that, in a way, the war had already been decided? Not on some bloody battlefield, but inside a simple, unassuming metal box. A single piece of captured tech that basically showed the future to the people who found it.
See, you have to understand the mindset in Berlin at the time. This quote pretty much sums it up. The official story, the propaganda being pushed by German high command, was that American technology was, well, junk. They saw it as crude, cheap, something slapped together by a nation of, well, shopkeepers and assembly line workers. They were absolutely convinced that it was no match for Germany's legendary precision engineering. The whole narrative was built around this idea of a fundamentally inferior enemy that had to rely on just brute force, not sophisticated, elegant design.
And yet, out on the front lines, something just wasn't adding up. The German intelligence reports coming back from the field were telling a completely different story. American tank columns, their air support, their infantry, they were all coordinating their attacks with a speed and a precision that, honestly, it seemed impossible. Their communications were constant, they were crystal clear, and they just never seemed to fail. It defied everything the experts back in Berlin believed. So what was going on? How are they doing it?
Well, the first real piece of the puzzle showed up in the wreckage after the Battle of Kasserine Pass. I want you to picture this. German technical teams are picking through the aftermath of what they saw as a tactical victory, sifting through the burning sands of Tunisia. And right there, they stumble upon the very clue that would end up revealing their own ultimate strategic defeat.
It was this, a standard-issue American radio, the SCR508. They pulled it from a knocked-out Sherman tank, and somehow it was miraculously intact. Now, to the soldiers who found it, it was just another piece of enemy equipment, right? But to the engineers who were about to examine it, this thing was like a prophecy, written in wires and circuits. So the task of analyzing it falls to Oberengineer Klaus Hermann, who was one of Germany's absolute top radio engineers. And when he opens the case, the first shock, it wasn't even the technology itself, it was the philosophy behind it. You see, German radios were these masterpieces of craftsmanship. They were hand-built by experts, finely tuned works of art. This American radio, though, this was something else entirely. It was clearly designed from the ground up to be built by the millions, to be used by literally anyone, and to be repaired on the fly in just a few minutes. And the tech inside? Well, it was far, far beyond anything Germany thought was possible for mass-produced field equipment. For starters, it used FM, frequency modulation for static-free communication. German engineers had actually dismissed that as way too complex for military use. It had automatic circuits that tuned themselves, so no more constant fiddling with a dial, and its modular design meant that any soldier with minimal training could just swap out a broken part right there on the battlefield. This wasn't just a better radio. It was a total revolution in military hardware. But as incredible as all of that was, it wasn't the main event. It wasn't the thing that completely shattered every single German assumption about American industry. Now, that discovery was a small, almost insignificant-looking component hidden deep inside the channel selector knob. 10. That's what they found. Not 1, not 2, but 10 precision ground quartz crystals. Now, you have to understand, in a German radio, a single one of these crystals was a precious, incredibly rare component. They were reserved for high command units. And here, in a standard-issue tank radio, they were installed as casually as you'd screw in a light bulb. This meant the operator could switch between 10 perfectly stable, crystal-clear frequencies with just a simple turn of a knob. It was unbelievable. And this table, this really illustrates the massive industrial chasm that had opened up between the two nations. Herman's team did the math. They calculated that to produce just one of those crystals to American specifications would take a highly skilled German technician 40 hours of painstaking work. 40 hours. Germany at its peak could maybe produce 200,000 of these a year. Later, intelligence revealed the Americans were churning out 30 million annually. They hadn't just made a better crystal, they had turned a laboratory art form into an everyday industrial commodity. So, the German engineers were just completely baffled. The scale of it was simply incomprehensible. Their report back to high command basically asked the question that was on everyone's mind. How? How could the Americans possibly have enough master technicians, these skilled artisans, to craft millions and millions of these perfect crystals? The answer, when it finally dawned on them, was absolutely terrifying. The Americans weren't using master technicians at all. They didn't need them. They had industrialized the entire process. They had created automated grinding machines that could be operated by semi-skilled workers, many of whom were women, by the way, on massive assembly lines. They were building these incredibly precise radio components the exact same way they built Ford cars.
And you have to realize this wasn't just about radio crystals. This philosophy applied to absolutely everything. At their absolute peak, German factories could maybe push out about 15,000 military radios a month. American factories, they were shipping over 100,000. It was a production gap that no amount of tactics, bravery, or even superior craftsman engineering could ever hope to close. The math was just brutal. Klaus Hermann, the engineer, he summarized this devastating truth in his final report to Berlin. He basically wrote the obituary for Germany's war effort right there. This wasn't a failure of German soldiers or even their brilliant scientists. It was a fundamental failure of an entire industrial model. Germany, the supposed industrial powerhouse of Europe, was effectively a craftsman's workshop, competing against a factory the size of a continent. It all came down to this simple but profound concept: industrial philosophy. See, it's not just about what you build, it's about how you think about building it. Germany pursued technical perfection, but in small, handcrafted numbers. America pursued good enough, but at an absolutely impossible scale. And in a global industrial war, scale wins. It wins every single time. Okay, so this is a fascinating piece of history, for sure. But why are we talking about it now? Why does any of this matter? Well, because the philosophy that was baked into that old radio. It's the very same philosophy that built the device you're using to watch this right now. Seriously, the principles pioneered in that SCR508 radio became the absolute blueprint for our modern technological world. The idea that you can mass-produce incredibly precise components, standardizing them so they fit in everything, making them modular so you just swap them out instead of trying to fix them, and designing all of it so that anyone can use it, not just an expert. I mean, that's the foundation of everything from your smartphone to your computer to your car.
You can draw a direct, unbroken line from the industrial philosophy that built millions of those quartz crystals to the invention of the transistor that replaced vacuum tubes, and from there to the integrated circuits and microprocessors that power literally every single aspect of our modern lives. The tech revolution didn't really start in Silicon Valley. You could argue it started on an assembly line in Chicago back in 1943.
So what's the big takeaway here? That one radio proved that modern wars are won in factories and design labs, not just on battlefields. The ability to design, produce, and deploy superior technology at an overwhelming scale is the ultimate strategic advantage. And that leaves us with a really big question, right? A provocative one. What is the equivalent of that radio crystal today? What's the invisible industrial blueprint that is quietly shaping the conflicts and the technology of our century?